Hey, welcome back to the channel, and my name is Kyle Got Camera, and today we're going to be talking about what is heart rate variability, how do you optimize it, why would you want to optimize it, and what you're going to need to look for if you're trying to interpret this data. And my hopes is with this video that I can give you a much simpler perspective, a much more accessible perspective and understanding of heart rate variability, because when I started getting into the literature, when I started studying it, when I started learning about it, I got really confused really quickly. So maybe if you're like me, you're interested in recovery, you're interested in reducing your stress, you're interested in improving your resilience, you're interested in getting into a flow state. All these things can be helped and aided through HRV training and through the use of measuring, quantifying heart rate variability and using lifestyle interventions and different practices to increase your heart rate variability. So I'm not an expert or any type of scientist or anything like that. I'm just a guy who was really interested in this stuff and wanted to understand it for myself. Again, my hopes with this video is that I can make a simple, sort of straightforward breakdown of heart rate variability to the best of my knowledge and give you some actionable and applicable steps so that you can start improving your HRV today. Timestamps will be below in the timeline as well in the description, so you can jump around the video if you want to. If you find this content interesting and you want to see more, be sure to hit that subscribe button and don't forget to hit the bell so you get notified anytime I release a new video. So let's get into the content. Let's start out with HRV. What is HRV? HRV is, simply put, it's a measurement of the variability in between heartbeats. The variation in our heartbeats is regulated by something called the autonomic nervous system, or the ANS, which is a primitive part of our nervous system that has two branches. It has the parasympathetic branch and the sympathetic branch. So we'll put up some definitions here. The parasympathetic, you can just think rest and digest, relax and recover. And the sympathetic, you can think fight or flight, excitement, anxiousness, readiness. These are the two nervous systems that we're working with when we're talking about the autonomic nervous system, and from now we can just reference it as the ANS. Typically, higher HRV scores are attributed with greater markers of well-being. Increasing your HRV can improve your sleep, your recovery, your mental health, and much more. Boiled down, HRV is how resilient is your body at adapting to change, whether it's going into parasympathetic or whether it's into sympathetic. And typically we want to have a good balance of both, being able to fluctuate in between the two. Known practices for increasing your HRV include mindfulness, breath work, visualization, compassion exercise, and cold therapy. And at the end of this video, I have some ninja techniques that I've been using and that I've discovered and that I've sort of worked on myself that I'm gonna be sharing with you. So stay till the end, and I'll be sure to get those resources to you as well. So when we're talking about measuring HRV, most devices and wearables that you see on the market today are using photoplasmography, which is basically just a little infrared sensor, infrared light that shines through your skin. It picks up in fluctuations in the blood volume via heart changes and pulse. Most HRV devices calculate HRV through two different types of measurements. The first being frequency domain measurements, and the second one being time domain measurements. There's 4 frequency bands that can be measured. There is the ultra low frequency, the very low frequency, the low frequency, and the high frequency. And we're going to get into what some of these mean and what they are and what to look for when it comes to these different bands when you're doing frequency domain measurements. Other way that we can measure is through time domain measurements. And time domain measurements are calculations between time intervals in between the heartbeats, kind of like that initial definition, and that is measured in milliseconds, or ms. The two different types of time domain measurements are SDNN and RMSSD. And I'm going to explain what each of those are in a minute, and we'll get into what to look for when it comes to looking at your time domain measurements, if those are the metrics that you're going to be using. So there's a lot of terms that can get kind of confusing, and so I just want to define some of these terms when it comes to heart rate variability so that when I say it, you understand what it means and there's no confusion there. So let me clear these words so that you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say them. Number one is artifacts. Artifacts are mistakes in the data when recording is taking place. So if you're using a device and you move around and it moves the sensor and it tracks basically irregular heartbeat, something that is not accurate, that is known as an artifact. And that is something to be aware of, because some tracking devices will have more artifacts, and the type of measurement that they're using may or may not include artifacts, which may skew the data in a certain way. So these are things to be aware of. when choosing a wearable and when looking to measure and optimize your HRV is to be just cognizant of what devices are going to create artifacts and what type of measurements are going to exclude them or include them. The next word is resonance. And resonance basically means it's a frequency of 0.1 hertz. And resonance breathing is a style of breathing that is supposed to bring you toward that measurement of 0.1 hertz on the low frequency band, which we'll talk about in a second, but this is associated with a state of coherence, okay? So when we're talking about resonance, we're talking also about coherence. So coherence is defined as a state of mind, heart, and emotional alignment as coined by the HeartMath Institute. And so this state of coherence is associated with greater states of well-being and all the feel-good, positive emotions that one might want to achieve through some type of breath work or meditation practice. And the next term to be aware of is the vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve, which is an extremely important nerve that goes from the top of your spine or the bottom of your neck and goes all the way down into your digestive system. And it's associated with a whole host of different bodily functions and is a fundamental part of the parasympathetic nervous system. When you hear vagal tone, that is basically the activation or the activity of the vagus nerve. And so a lot of these breathwork practices or a lot of HRV training all centers around vagal tone. How can we increase vagal tone? And then last but not least, for these terms to just know and be aware of is hertz. Hertz is just a measurement, a unit of measurement for the frequency band. So when you see hertz, you can know that that is looking at the frequency domain measurements. And when you see the ms or milliseconds, that is associated with the time domain measurements. Hope that makes sense. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below if you need clarification or if I missaid something or misdefined something I'm doing. I did my very best to make sure this is all accurate, and I'm also, I'm just a human being, so I may not be perfect, and this is relatively new information for me. So I hope that you're finding it useful, because as soon as I started to understand this, and we're going to get into how you can actually apply all this mumbo jumbo pretty quickly here, you're going to see there's a lot of power in understanding this, right? Like once you understand it and you can really comprehend the utility of this, I believe that with that education, you'll be empowered to make some changes and to practice some of these things that we're going to be talking about in this video. So let's get into the frequency domain measurements. And for the sake of this video, I'm not going to go into the ultra low frequency band or the very low frequency band, because there's a lot of controversy around what influences what and what means what. And so there's just a lot of discussion happening and still a lot of more research to do. And most of the devices that are accessible to consumers are not going to be measuring the ultra low or the very low. So for the sake of this video, just know that those exist and that they're important, and there's a whole bunch of factors that influence them. And we're just going to move straight to the low frequency band and the high frequency band and talk about the significance of these different frequency bands and how you can influence them and what they mean and what to look for when you're measuring them. When you're looking at readings or measurements of the low frequency or high frequency band, what you're basically looking at is just like which one is more dominant at the time of that measurement. All the bands are active. There's not going to be like one time where like the other bands aren't working. They're all working, and there's always going to be activity there, but it's like which one is more dominant or which one is more present, more active. So the low frequency band requires at least a 2 minute of measurement in order to get an accurate reading. There's disagreement about what contributes to the low frequency band, whether it's the parasympathetic or the sympathetic. It's thought right now that it could be both that is influencing this band. But what is known as using different types of breath work, you can influence this band, right? So whether it's Buteyko breathing, which we'll talk about at the end, or whether it is resonance breathing or Wim Hof, or whether it's box breathing, we know that this band can be heavily influenced by the respiratory system and by our breathing patterns. Based on my research and what I found, this band may be representative of autonomic balance. And for that reason, this is the band that we're going to be focusing on manipulating our breath to help get us towards that state of coherence or towards that state of equilibrium where we're feeling in alignment with our mind, with our heart, and with our emotions. So when you're looking at your measurements of your low frequency band, If you can get to a state where you have reached zero point 0.1 hertz, then that is associated with, according to HeartMath, that state of coherence. So if you have a device that measures the frequency domain measurements, then you will be able to see if your low frequency band was able to reach that point, and you can start using different types of breath work to move yourself towards that particular state. And there's a particular breath pattern called the resonance breath pattern, or resonance breathing, right? It's a resonance breathing practice. It's different for everyone what your particular resonance breathing is, but it is somewhere between 4 and 6 breaths per minute. Assuming, let's just say it's 6 breaths per minute, that would be 4 on the in count, inhale through your nose, and 6 on the out through your mouth. That's resonance. Buteyko breathing, which is another form of gentle breath work that I really enjoy as well, that I have noticed greater lifts in my HRV, would be in through the nose 4, out through the nose 6. However, there is a methodology, there is a way of testing to see what your resonance breathing is, and we'll talk about that at the end with the resources. So just know that when you're training your low frequency band, you can do that through doing different types of breath work. The high frequency band is between 0.15 and 0.4 hertz. This requires at least 1 minute of recording in order to be accurate. Ideally, the longer you record, the better and more cohesive the data could be. And this band can be associated with parasympathetic activity. This measurement indicates cardiac and vagal control. Lower high frequency band scores are associated with higher stress, anxiety, and panic. There's something called the low frequency to high frequency ratio, which is a measurement that's basically showing you the difference between the two. And this could potentially give you an estimate between your parasympathetic and your sympathetic activity. So a low frequency to high frequency ratio would be associated with greater relaxation, greater parasympathetic activity, and the opposite would be true. So high frequency to low frequency ratio would mean you're stressed, or you're overwhelmed, or you're anxious, or you're more sympathetic dominant. However, this may not be the best metric to look at because it is not shown to be as accurate when we're measuring it against the other types of measurements over a 24-hour period. So this may not be the best metric to look at to really get a clear picture of what's going on, as there are much more accurate ways to get an assessment of where your nervous system is at. So a quick distinction here that I think is very important: if you're looking to optimize HRV to lower stress and to induce more relaxation and live in a more parasympathetic state, then you're going to want to train that low frequency band using those different types of breath work. However, if you want to get a clear picture of what's going on from your recovery, your overall recovery, then you do not want to look at that, because that is not going to give you a clear picture of what's really going on. We want to look at an HRV score that cannot be manipulated by the breath, which we're going to talk about right now. Also, let me know again if you have any questions at this point, because if you're not lost, I'd be super proud of you. And put them in the comments below. If I've gotten anything wrong to the best of your understanding, please correct me in the comments, and I will be happy to make some follow-up videos. So that brings us to our time domain measurements, which we have 2 of. We have the SDNN and the RMSSD. The SDNN is the standard deviation of interbeat intervals of normal sinus beats. Yes, got that right. This particular measurement should have no artifacts. It should remove the artifacts, and thus it should be a more accurate reading. However, in order to get the best data from this measurement, you're gonna wanna do it over a 24-hour period, but at a minimum, you can do it for 5 minutes and it will give you a semi good reading. But you're really, if you're looking for optimal metrics and optimal accuracy, you're gonna wanna do this one over a 24-hour period. Not many of us are gonna do that. So, if you just wanna get a snapshot, then maybe 5 minutes is what you do for this one. This particular measurement can give us an insight into our sympathetic nervous system, and the SDNN is correlated with the ultra low, the very low, and the low frequency band. Some devices use a similar measurement called the SDRR, and this does include artifacts. And so if you're buying a device for HRV, you want to make sure that it's not doing the SDRR measurement, or you're not looking at that metric as what you're basing your decisions off of. So always look for the SDRR versus the SDNN. So if you're looking for the best short-term time domain measurement, then that is going to be your RMSSD. This is the measurement that you're going to see on an Oura ring or a Whoop strap, and what this is a great metric of your recovery. This gives us insight into our parasympathetic nervous system and cannot be changed or influenced by respiration, and is one of the best measures of vagal tone. So I love my Oura ring for tracking recovery because it's taking that measurement while you're asleep. It can't be influenced by movement or by breath or thoughts or anything that's going on. It's literally just your recovery as you're sleeping, right? So it's a great measurement, but it has its limitations because I'm not able to actually see those frequency domain measurements that we talked about as well. Neither can I see the SDNN. So I decided to pick up another device that I can use to get all that data, and I can cross-reference it with my Oura ring, and therefore I can get a more accurate snapshot of not only my actual recovery, but all the other measurements when it comes to the frequency domain stuff that we've talked about already. Because I want to know what's working, and I want to take real-time measurements, and I want to see how the things that I'm doing are influencing it, like while I'm awake, not just while I'm asleep. So recovery is one thing, but also living in a state of coherence, having more flow, being more calm, that may be associated with having a higher RMSSD score, but we also want to look at these other measurements, and that way we can have greater insight into quantifying what we actually want to spend our time doing, because there's a lot of wellness trends, there's a lot of biohacks that you could do, but it's just about, okay, what's going to move the needle and what's important to me, and how do I know that it's working? Does that make sense? For this, I use the Polar H10 chest strap, and I pair it with the Elite HRV app. And this gives me all that data that we just talked about, and I'm able to track it in real time. So I will obviously wear my Oura ring to bed, and I will be able to get that data there. But then first thing when I wake up, I will take my HRV for 5 minutes, just sitting down in bed. And I do it roughly at the same time every morning, and I do it for minimum 5 minutes so I can get all that data, and I can really get a clear picture on what's going on with my body in that given day. And if I'm doing lifestyle interventions or biohacks, I can see how it's changing really quickly and if the trends are improving in the direction that I want them to be. I'm actually working on another video. It should be live within the next week. If not already, by the time you're watching this video, I will link it up right here when it goes live and down in the description as well, about my full experience using the Polar H10, how I'm using the data, how I'm applying it, in a full comprehensive review of the product and the app, so you can see if this is something that you would want to use, and you can start optimizing this way as well. By the way, I would love to hear what you're using to track your HRV right now and why. Let me know in the comments, and would like to start a discussion around what are the different trackers people are using, because although I do believe the Polar H10 paired with the Elite HRV app is an incredible tool, maybe there's other tools out there that I don't know about. So definitely let me know in the comments what you're using. And when it comes to optimizing your HRV, what you want to look at is, if you're wanting to enhance your overall recovery, your RMSSD is that number that you're going to want to be looking for, right? And looking to optimize, and know that that can't be manipulated by your breath patterns. But if you're looking to optimize that state of coherence, that stress reduction, that parasympathetic activity, then you might want to be looking at those frequency domains and trying to get more lower frequency band activity. So if you want to optimize your nervous system and increase your resilience, then I will link up the best tools I have in the description. Number one being the Sleep Advantage, which is my course on sleep optimization. And that is particularly good for the recovery and getting that RMSSD score to go up, because sleep, out of all the things that you could do to enhance your recovery, is probably the lowest hanging fruit and one of the easiest and cheapest and best things to optimize first. Also, if you're looking to strengthen that nervous system and live in a more parasympathetic state and build that resilience, you can check out the Prehab Dojo. The Prehab Dojo is basically meditation for your muscles. It's a mindful movement practice that allows you to build a strong connection between your mind and your muscles and strengthen that neural pathway. And all you have to do is click the link in the description, and you can download a free track. Whatever part of your body you can work on, you'll get a audio track that you can listen to, kind of like a guided meditation, where you do the exercise along with Skip Kelly, the founder, who's a good friend of mine. And then in addition to that, some other resources I got a bunch for you, is if you download the HRV app, which is totally free, then you can try the 10-week resonance breathing course. It's something that I just started where you do resonance breathing twice a day for 20 minutes, and you start to build that vagal tone. You start to increase your resilience and that autonomic balance between your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. In addition to that, one more resource that I will leave you with is a dude named Greg McEwen, who wrote a book called The Oxygen Advantage, and I will put a link to his YouTube channel in the description. And he uses a form of breathwork called Buteyko breathing, which I mentioned earlier, which is incredible. It's gentle nose breathing, in through the nose, out through the nose. And if you download the app Insight Timer, free app, there is a meditation or guided breathwork that Greg McEwen did where he walks you through how to do this nose breathing. And you can start practicing immediately, and I'm telling you, you will feel the difference pretty quickly. It's incredible. So we've covered a lot of ground here, and I don't want to make this video longer than it already is. So be sure to like this if you found it helpful, if it was informative, if it was educational, if you found value in it. It really does help get this video out to more people so more people can find the channel and learn this information so that they can increase their recovery, reduce their stress, do whatever it is that they're trying to optimize right now. And this is just one of many videos in a series of videos that I'm making right now that I'm very excited about. So I know you're gonna like this one or this one, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Take care and be well.